There's a saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Hey, it's Bilal, and this is Deep Sea, the podcast about seeing the world more deeply. Raised in Western culture, I think of time as an arrow. That is, I feel I'm constantly moving forward to the future, leaving the past behind. Implicit within this is the notion that I'm progressing. While this has benefits, it has shortcomings too. Progress suggests that I'm moving to something better, which must mean that where I am is worse, so I'm never happy with what I currently have. Obviously, this is not the best way to live one's life, but there are other ways to think about time, which can make life much more fulfilling. For example, one can think of time in terms of events. This is especially the case with long periods of time, such as thinking about the next 10 or 20 years. It's so far in the future that it seems like an eternity. But if we convert this to events, it suddenly becomes much more real. An example would be to think about the age of your parents. Say they are 70 years old. The average life expectancy for an adult is 80 years old. So, on a morbid note, your parents would likely have only 10 years to live. Now, think about how often you meet your parents each year. Let's say it's twice a year. That means you will meet your parents 20 more times before they pass away. Suddenly, that 10 years becomes much more real. It will make you appreciate every interaction you have with your parents. If anything, you may want to meet them more often, as 10 or 20 years may not be as long as you thought. You can apply this way of thinking to all aspects of your life, from attending sports days with your children to activities you can do with a healthy body. Another way of thinking about time is expanded presence. We tend to think about the impact we have on the world in terms of our time on the planet. So if we live for 80 years, then that's the time span over which we impact the world. However, the reality is that our presence actually touches 240 years rather than 80 years. Let me explain. Think about the oldest person that held you as a baby. Say they were 80 years old. As a baby then, you were connected to the 80 years before you were born. Equally, think about the baby you will hold when you are at your oldest. Then you're connected to 80 years after you die. In total then, that expands your presence to 240 years. That's the 80 years before you were born, 80 years of your life, and 80 years after you die. So if you're 40, your expanded presence goes all the way back to 1900 and will go forward to 2140. That's a lot of time. You touch more lives than you think. The third way of thinking about time is cyclical time. Many cultures prefer to see time as a cycle rather than an arrow. So rather than seeing the future as unknown, it sees it as a repeat of the past. Think about how night follows day and day follows night, or how the 4 seasons repeat each year. This also means we can see life as a cycle too. Humans are born, grow up, and die. Then the cycle repeats. It also means governments rise and fall, we get jobs and lose jobs, we are happy one day and sad the next. This way of thinking makes one much less fearful of the future and less fearful of dark times. It's a cycle, after all. Finally, we can think that there is no past and no future. One of my favorite animated films is Kung Fu Panda. And in the film, the wise Yoda-like Master Oogway tells the titular character Po,
You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
The truth in this is that both the past and the future are ideas in our head, and all we really have is the present moment. That is, the moment we are in is all that exists for us. But too often, we populate the present moment with thoughts and hopes for the future, or we populate it with nostalgia and reminiscences of the past. This can also degenerate into catastrophizing the future when all we see are terrible futures, which lead to anxiety, or it can degenerate into ruminating on the past when we constantly replay bad memories, which leads to depression. All of these ways of thinking neglect the present moment and what is actually happening in front of us in the real world. So rather than thinking of time, focus on what is around us right now. To sum up then, we can break the prison of time in 4 ways. First, we can convert time to events. Second, we can think of expanded presence. Third, we can see time as cyclical. And finally, we can realize the power of the present moment. Hope this all helps. You can get more details in the show notes, which can be found on my blog, bilalhafiz.com. Please tell a friend about the podcast, leave a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcast. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @BilalHafiz123 on Facebook, or you can follow me on my blog. I'll be back soon, so tune in then.